So what happens when an inheritance gets locked away and the very people in charge just won't give you any answers? Well, today we're diving deep into a fascinating case file, a 15-month battle for transparency, all captured in a single, absolutely explosive email chain. Let's break it all down.
Okay, so the heart of this whole conflict is just this long, frustrating silence. You see, an executor gets appointed to manage an estate way back in October 2024, and then crickets. For nearly 15 months, there's absolutely nothing. No updates, no accounting, nothing. Finally, in December of 2025, the beneficiary, a guy named Richard, is forced to make a formal demand just to ask, hey, what is going on with my own inheritance?
Now, this wasn't just some simple request for a document. Oh no. This was really the first shot fired in a battle over a really important legal concept known as fiduciary duty. That's the legal and, frankly, ethical obligation for an executor to act in the best interest of the beneficiaries. And this email, well, it kicked off a direct conflict with the estate's attorney.
In his very first formal email, Richard doesn't just ask questions, he lays out a clear legal failure. He points out that under Indiana law, a complete inventory of all the estate's assets was actually due way back in December 2024. So now, a full 14 months late, nothing had been filed. This wasn't just him being impatient, this was the first documented breach of the executor's legal duty.
So you'd think the response would be, oh, our mistake, here are the documents, right? Nope. The attorney's response is immediate and it is aggressive. Instead of just providing the info, she tries to shut him down with a legal technicality. She claims Richard isn't a beneficiary of the estate, but of a separate trust. It's a classic legal move, really, designed to deny him any right to know what's going on with the assets.
But here's the thing. Richard had done his homework. He immediately comes right back at her, and he cites the specific Indiana law that proves its point. See, since the estate's assets were the trust's assets, he, as a beneficiary of that trust, had a clear legal right to be kept in the loop. This single citation just completely dismantled the attorney's whole argument and pretty much forced her to hand over the data.
You'd think that initial win would cool things down, but it actually did the opposite. It escalated the whole conflict. From this point on, Richard starts meticulously documenting this whole pattern of what he alleged were professional failures and breaches of duty. He was basically building a case, piece by piece, against both the executor and her attorney.
So he breaks down his allegations against the attorney into four main areas. He's accusing her of misrepresenting the law, which is a big deal. He points out what he calls administrative hypocrisy. Demanding speed from him while she's causing these massive delays. And he even claims she provided factually incorrect information about something as simple as a wire transfer.
And the allegations against the executor herself? Wow, they were even more serious. We're talking a fundamental breach of her duty, sure, but also conversion. That's a legal term that basically means civil theft. He accused her of selling his personal property without his permission. And, on top of all that, she had allegedly paid herself thousands of dollars from the estate, while he, the beneficiary, hadn't seen a dime in over a year.
This is where it gets really interesting. You see, the attorney's story of a timely and swift process just clashes so hard with reality. On one hand, she's praising the executor's diligence, but then Richard just points to this one, simple, undeniable fact. It is January 2026, and the estate is still waiting on a tax refund from 2022. The whole idea of this being swift just completely falls apart.
Okay, so after Richard threatens to file a petition with the court, a small payment of $5,000 is finally made. But really, that just cleared the way for the real fight, the main event. This is where the core financial conflict comes into sharp focus, and it leads to this huge standoff over the entire remaining balance of the estate. And this is what the fight was truly all about. Over $378,000. And let's be clear, this wasn't some complicated piece of real estate or stocks that had to be sold. No, this was just cash, cold, hard cash, sitting in a low-interest bank account, completely ready for distribution.
So what's the big justification for holding all that money hostage? Well, here it is. The attorney states, with no room for argument, that nothing is going to happen until a minor tax refund, from over 3 years prior, by the way, is received from the IRS. She presents this like it's some unbreakable law, not a choice they're making.
I mean, the logic here just seems completely out of whack. As Richard points out, they were holding back 100% of the cash, over $378 grand, all because of this tiny pending tax refund that was worth less than 2% of the estate's total value. Financially, it just makes no sense whatsoever.
So instead of just getting mad, Richard proposes a really simple, totally standard solution. He suggests, hey, just hold back a small reserve fund, say $10,000, to cover any final taxes or fees, and then immediately distribute the rest of the money. I mean, this isn't some wild, crazy idea. This is common, fiscally responsible practice in pretty much every estate administration.
So what was the response to this very reasonable proposal? Was it a negotiation, a legal counterargument? Nope. It was a complete and total shutdown. A flat-out refusal to distribute the funds and a clear challenge that basically said, if you don't like it, sue us. That was the final word.
This entire email chain really serves as a powerful case study for any of us who might find ourselves involved in an estate. So let's talk about the critical lessons we can learn from how this one beneficiary fought back.
You know, this quote from the beneficiary himself really sums up his whole strategy perfectly. Any success he had in forcing them to act, from getting that first accounting to receiving that small payment, it came from consistently relying on a documented record. We're talking facts, dates, email chains, and legal statutes, not just emotional arguments.
So, this case gives us a clear playbook if you're ever facing a difficult executor. First, document everything. Second, research your specific rights so you can cite the law, just like Richard did. Third, always propose reasonable solutions. It shows you're being cooperative. And finally, you have to make it crystal clear that while you don't want to go to court, you are absolutely prepared to if you have to.
And so we end with this question, which is really the central issue of this entire case. An executor has a duty to settle an estate efficiently. But at what point does a long, unexplained delay, especially when you're making reasonable requests, cross the line from just slow administration into an actual breach of that sacred fiduciary duty? It's a critical question, and something for anyone in a similar position to really think about.